So, the second thing therefore is to know what you want to achieve at the end of this exercise. So, the key aspect is really speaking, you want to put something in the consumer's mind. I don't know how many of you might have seen the Oscar nominated movie called Inception, where the idea is to kind of put a thought while the person is in a kind of dream state. So really speaking, you want to put something in somebody's mind. You might want to change their attitude towards something, or you might want the customer or the person to act in a certain way. Typically, these are the kinds of broad objectives. Now, these may be fine-tuned and broken down to more specific targeted objectives, and that's your job as a marketer and a marketing professional. So, there are several ways to figure out these kinds of objectives, and one of the things that we will have a look at here and in maybe the chapter on advertising is the hierarchy of effects model propagated by Lavage and Steiner, which looks at awareness, knowledge, liking, preference, conviction and purchase. Now, each of these are separate steps and your objectives can be aligned to some of these steps, or you can go more simpler, which is the classic AIDA model. Now, it all depends what you want to choose. So, let us not get into too much detail here because this will also be covered in the chapter on advertising. The key thing here is also to design the message. What is it you want to communicate? So, really speaking, this has components like the content of the message, the structure of the message, the format and the symbolic way in which you want to send the message, and very critically also who should say this. So, it is important for us to have a message source. You might look at, for example, the Polio Plus, which is done by Rotary and by governments in India. You will find many times that they use very credible, inverted comma credible, but very popular celebrities, especially film personalities, in order to assure the audience, which is a very mass audience, that it is safe and necessary to go through this Polio Plus program. And for example, in Tamil Nadu, they have used people, superstars like Rajinikanth to propagate this message. So, it is important to decide on who might carry a certain level of credibility with the audience. So, there are various ways to structure and create a message looking at both rational appeals, emotional appeals or moral appeals. So there are various ways that we can figure out what will work with that audience. Similarly, it's very vital to decide which channel to use, because sometimes the wrong channel may send across the wrong message. So we could have direct, personal communication channels or non-personal communication channels like using media. Now you will find sometimes when there is a problem, it is sometimes the CEO who comes ahead and talks to the general public. A famous case is that of Johnson & Johnson when they had this PR disaster with respect to Tylenol. Some person had put in some poisonous material in certain batches, in certain Tylenol packets in certain parts of the country in the US. Now what they did was a famous case study where the company decided to pull out all the Tylenol from the marketplace, not leave one packet behind, and the CEO himself came out and said, why they wanted to do such a thing. That created a huge favorable image for Johnson & Johnson. It's so very important therefore to decide who should say and how they should say it. Now, personal communication channels are where it's done person to person, either through different ways, either the company personnel or somebody else who's seen as a key expert, or it could even be social channels. Today increasingly social media via the internet is becoming more and more a source for most people before they decide to even buy a product, and therefore it's vital for the company to be part of that conversation and part of that environment. There is also the non-personal communication channels, different kinds of things today, both in print, broadcast media, and also the internet itself, and so many other display media as well. Now, this is very important according to Fiske and Hartley, because the more the influence of the communication source over the recipient, the better the impact and the change that it has. So, choosing the channel is very, very vital. But a very important thing in all this is to figure out how much money do you want to spend, and therefore the budget or setting the budget is a key component of this entire process. There are several methods here, and we will see these kind of things again and again, because budgeting is a very singularly important facet of any marketing exercise. So, you could go on the basis of what you can afford or a percentage of sales, or based on what competitors are doing and achieving a certain parity with them, or look at the objectives and tasks that are being set out and figure out what exactly is that objective you want to achieve, what are the specific tasks that are required, and therefore what is the budget that is needed for it. Finally, one needs to decide on the aggregate communication mix, so that is a set of choices again for the marketer. As we know, there are broadly 5 promotional tools: advertising, public relations, sales promotion, personal selling and direct marketing. In what manner does one want to spend one's marketing rupees and dollars is a big decision, and how you do this depends on the various objectives and tasks that you have set out. Now, while doing this, you need to consider what certain things. One is, what is the product and market that we are talking about? Is it B2C, B2B, new product, look at the stage of the life cycle, look at your competitive position, things like that. Second is to see how ready are buyers, and third is to see, like we mentioned earlier, the product life cycle. So, there are different types of markets that we have. There are different stages of readiness of the buyer, and there's different stages of the product itself as per the PLC. Each of these has an impact on the kind of media mix that one has. Finally, one has to measure the results, and the typical measures are the outcomes that one set out, the objectives that one has. So, what are the outcomes that one has? And specifically, one would like to also see whether it has any impact on revenues, because finally a business exists to make money, and if it doesn't make that amount of money, many times the business may not continue to exist. So, typically you have to look at it in terms of the outcomes. A big outcome is revenues. So, in sum, this is becoming more and more important given the complexity and diversity of media channels, the amount of noise that exists today, and it is important therefore for a company to start putting all this together in an integrated fashion, so that it sends a consistent message to the target audience. And to do that, it has to use a wide mix of methods, from advertising, personal selling, direct marketing, public relations, and so on and so forth. The idea is to achieve synergy at different levels within and outside the organization, with the view to send a consistent message. As you have seen, there are several challenges, there are several decisions to be made at different stages, and following a certain process, as we saw, looking at the target market, the objectives, the budget, measuring the outcomes and so on and so forth, is very vital in ensuring that this integrated marketing communication exercise is effective.